Unaware the single mom he mocked was the billionaire who secretly owned his parents' company, Alex Morgan signed the divorce papers with a smirk, convinced he was leaving behind a struggling woman who'd only slowed him down. She stood silent in her worn cardigan that morning, clutching the pen with trembling fingers, letting him believe she was powerless. But beneath that quiet stare was the owner of the empire that paid his father's salary, financed his mother's charity, and built the penthouse he was moving into with his mistress. He thought he was walking into freedom, but every step he took was on ground she owned. The world saw a broken wife, but behind her calm eyes was a storm built on betrayal. Kindness turned weapon, and love twisted into vengeance. So who exactly was this ordinary single mom he discarded? How did the woman he underestimated become the force that would leave him and his mistress homeless? And what kind of revenge begins in silence? The first time Alexander Morgan met Rebecca Sinclair, she was wearing a plain gray dress and carrying a toddler on her hip, waiting tables at a cafe near his office. Her smile was soft, uncertain, the kind that made people tip out of sympathy, not admiration. He had just landed a contract at Morgan Engineering Solutions, his parents' mid-tier manufacturing firm trying to stay alive after a corporate buyout. He'd ordered coffee and stayed longer than usual, watching her balance exhaustion and grace like someone who'd learned to survive on quiet strength. She wasn't loud. She didn't flirt. But when she spoke about her son, 4 years old, curly-haired, endlessly curious, Alex saw something he didn't know he needed. Purpose. They started talking, then helping, then falling. Within months he convinced her to quit the cafe, promising he could give her stability. She never said no. She just smiled, the kind of smile that hides more than it reveals. To Alex, Rebecca was the woman who grounded him. To Rebecca, Alex was a test, though she never admitted it. Even to herself, her grandfather, Howard Sinclair, had built Sinclair Holdings, a multi-billion-dollar empire controlling logistics, tech, and real estate. When he died, his will stunned the board. All assets would pass to his granddaughter. But she had to live as an ordinary citizen for 7 years. No titles, no publicity, no visible wealth. To prove she could understand the value of humanity before inheriting power. Rebecca obeyed. She shed the Sinclair name, moved to Boston, and lived quietly as a single mom. The world saw a waitress. Her grandfather's lawyer saw a promise kept. Alex knew nothing of that world. His parents, Robert and Elaine Morgan, were once high society, until their company nearly collapsed after a market crash. Rebecca's grandfather had secretly acquired 70% of Morgan Engineering to save it, though the Morgans believed it was a silent investor named Aurelian Capital. That capital was Rebecca's inheritance fund, a detail she never mentioned. Their marriage looked perfect at first. Alex's parents liked her for her humility, his mother especially. Elaine had grown up watching Robert cheat and stay powerful because she stayed silent. To her, Rebecca was a second chance for the family, a woman who could endure, not explode. But silence is dangerous when it begins to resemble surrender. The years rolled by. Rebecca built their home, raised his children, and supported his dream of expanding Morgan Engineering into aerospace contracts. Every deal he closed was approved quietly through a shell board she controlled. Every success he celebrated had her signature somewhere hidden in it. She never told him. Not out of deceit, but because she wanted to believe love could exist without status. Alex's kindness began to fade the day his promotions started catching the attention of investors. Success infected him slowly, like rust under paint. At work, he laughed louder. At home, he listened less. He still kissed her forehead, but the touch grew mechanical. Gratitude, not affection. Meanwhile, Rebecca's son from her past marriage, Ethan, grew curious about the family business. "Mom, why don't we visit Grandpa's company?" he once asked. She'd smiled faintly. "Someday you'll understand." That someday was closer than anyone realized. Underneath the calm of their marriage lay 50 years of inherited chaos, each character unknowingly repeating their parents' tragedies. Rebecca's father had cheated on her mother with a business partner's wife. That betrayal shattered her mother's mental health and turned Rebecca into a woman obsessed with controlling her environment. Alex's father, Robert, had bankrupted his own brother to protect his ego during the 2008 crash. That same selfishness had quietly taught Alex that love is a currency. Elaine Morgan, the mother who preached loyalty, had once forged her husband's signature to transfer company shares back to herself after his affair, and hid it for decades. Rebecca's first husband, David Cole, had abandoned her for a wealthier woman the same week she miscarried their second child. That pain calcified into silence, not rage. Every scar in their family's histories was embedded in their marriage like shards under marble, invisible but cutting. Still, Rebecca kept giving. She organized charity dinners for Alex's company, nurtured his public image, and smiled at photographs she would never appear in. Her kindness became currency he spent freely. And when he joked to colleagues that, "My wife's just a simple woman," she laughed along. The laughter of someone who has seen too much to be shaken by ignorance. Yet fate has a way of replaying lessons until you learn them. At a company gala one evening, Alex introduced Rebecca to Travis Reed, his former college roommate turned venture capital partner. Travis was everything Alex wanted to be: tall, charming, and recklessly confident. The men toasted to new beginnings, unaware they were setting the stage for ruin. When Travis shook Rebecca's hand, she felt something unsettling: familiarity. His father had once been on the board of Sinclair Logistics, dismissed years ago for insider trading. She said nothing, but her smile tightened. From that night, everything shifted. Alex began spending longer hours at work. Rebecca started receiving anonymous tips from a friend in the corporate office. "He's not where he says he is." But she refused to believe it. Not Alex. Not after everything she'd built around him. Still, one night, she waited. The clock hit midnight. No call, no car in the driveway. Just silence. The same silence her mother endured when her father stopped coming home. Rebecca sat by the window, staring at the city lights, the empire she technically owned but emotionally ignored. Kindness had built her world. Love had blinded her. And betrayal, though she didn't know it yet, was about to redefine her name. The morning Alex told Rebecca he'd be working late, his cologne lingered longer than usual. Sharp, expensive, and new. The scent clung to his suit jacket as he left, the same way lies cling to silence. Rebecca didn't question him. She simply nodded, pouring coffee she wouldn't drink. It was how her mother used to handle her father's absences. Dignified surrender disguised as trust. By the time dusk folded over the Boston skyline, she was still sitting at the kitchen table, the house quiet except for the tick of the wall clock. Her phone buzzed. A message from one of the staff at Morgan Engineering. "Ma'am, I thought you should know." Mr. Morgan checked into the Winslow with Travis. Reed for a meeting, but only one woman signed in with them. Rebecca's hand tightened around the phone until her knuckles whitened. The world didn't collapse in that moment. It just shifted, like glass cracking before it shatters. She called Alex. No answer. Called again. Straight to voicemail. She whispered into the receiver. "You're running the same pattern your father did." Then she hung up. When Alex finally returned past midnight, she was waiting by the window, wearing the same gray cardigan he used to say made her look comfortably poor. He smiled faintly, fumbling for excuses before she even spoke. "Traffic. Travis needed me to—" She cut him off. Was she worth it? The words stopped him cold. His mouth twitched, caught between defiance and guilt. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Yes, you do," she said softly. "And so do I." He looked at her for a long moment, then exhaled sharply, a smirk tugging at his lips. "Rebecca, don't make this dramatic. We've grown apart. You're different. Distant. You used to need me." Her voice stayed calm. "I still do, Alex. just not the way you think. That night, when he slept in the guest room, she sat awake, replaying every small humiliation she'd once forgiven. Every forgotten anniversary. Every subtle insult disguised as banter. Every time he'd called her, lucky to have me. She remembered her mother whispering through tears decades ago. A man doesn't betray you once. He betrays you in pieces. Rebecca now understood. But Alex's betrayal wasn't just infidelity. It was arrogance. He wasn't sleeping with Travis's girlfriend or some stranger. He was entangled with Madeline Carter, a publicist and socialite who'd recently joined the investment group overseeing the merger between Morgan Engineering and Reed Tech Ventures. She was also Travis Reed's on-again, off-again lover. And by proximity, Alex's ticket to more influence. Rebecca knew of Madeline. Everyone did. She was elegant, predatory, and notoriously drawn to married men with ambition. She was also the kind of woman who mistook exposure for power, the polar opposite of Rebecca's quiet dominance. Over the next month, Alex grew careless. He took weekend business trips. He bought Madeline jewelry using funds from the joint account. He started attending exclusive events without his wedding ring. Photos surfaced online, the kind taken by anonymous guests at galas who knew how to trade gossip for clout. Rebecca watched it all unfold without a word. Her lawyer, Anthony Dwyer, quietly documented everything. Each receipt, each email, each photograph. Meanwhile, her past, the 50 tangled backstories that shaped her, began resurfacing like ghosts. She thought of her mother, Margaret Sinclair, a painter who once found her husband's mistress posing in her studio. Margaret had broken her silence that day, only to be told by her husband that artists feel too much. Rebecca had inherited that pain, the need to observe betrayal like art, dissecting it instead of destroying it. She thought of her father's affair with his business partner's wife, which led to his partner's suicide and her own mother's breakdown. She thought of how her father drank himself to death at 47, claiming the world isn't fair to men who love too many women. She'd sworn never to become like her mother, never to beg, never to break. And now, sitting in that same emotional position, she realized she had kept her promise. She wasn't broken. She was waiting. One evening, Alex came home late again, humming a tune as he opened a bottle of wine. "You've been quiet lately," he said. "Quiet people are dangerous," she replied. He chuckled, pouring himself a glass. "You're not dangerous, Rebecca. You're kind. That's your weakness." She looked at him, expression unreadable. You'll remember saying that. That was the night she made her first move. Not in rage, but in control. She contacted her grandfather's legal executor, Samuel Avery, a man who'd served the Sinclair estate for 40 years. "It's time," she said simply. Within days, dormant accounts were reactivated, subsidiaries reassigned, and her private team of financial auditors began tracing every investment linked to Alex and Travis. What she found sickened her. They had used her own company's dividends as collateral for personal loans. Her signature, forged by Alex, appeared on a document transferring shares of Morgan Engineering to Reed Ventures. He wasn't just unfaithful, he was stealing. And yet, he walked around the house like a man untouchable. When she confronted him, it wasn't loud, it was surgical. "Alex, do you ever wonder why you've never failed?" she asked over dinner. He smirked. "Because I work harder than most." "No," she said, her voice steady. "Because I've been cleaning your messes for 8 years. He laughed. "Rebecca, you're a waitress turned housewife. What could you possibly clean up for me?" The silence that followed was heavier than glass. "Everything," she said. He scoffed. "You wouldn't survive without me." She smiled faintly. "That's the last illusion you'll ever have." That night, she packed a small suitcase. Not to leave, but to remind herself what walking away felt like. Then she sat by the window again, watching the same skyline that once represented hope. Only now, it shimmered with purpose. Her kindness had been mocked, her love betrayed, her silence misread. But soon her revenge would begin. Not loud, not angry, but devastatingly complete. And when it was over, Alex wouldn't just lose her. He'd lose everything he thought was his, including the roof over his head. Rebecca didn't sleep that night. The city outside pulsed with life, but her mind moved with surgical calm. She'd spent years hiding her true identity, watching men mistake her silence for submission. Now the game was hers to end. The following morning, she walked into her private office, a modest space above a Sinclair subsidiary registered under another name. Her assistant, Lydia Grant, was already there, eyes wide. "It's all ready, ma'am," Lydia said. "The transfer documents, the subpoenas, the media packets, everything." Rebecca nodded. "Then let's begin." By noon, Morgan Engineering, the company Alex claimed as his own, was in chaos. The boardroom meeting had been set up under the guise of celebrating the Reed merger. Travis Reed strutted in first, cufflinks gleaming, his arrogance matching Alex's energy perfectly. Madeline, the mistress, sat beside him in an ivory dress that screamed confidence and ignorance in equal measure. Cameras waited in the lobby. The press had been tipped off that a major leadership announcement was coming. Alex adjusted his tie in the glass reflection. "After today," he said, grinning. "We're untouchable," Travis laughed. "You and me, brother. The next kings of the new industrial age. But kings fall the moment they believe they're gods." The double doors opened. Rebecca entered. For a moment, silence replaced air. She didn't look broken or vengeful, just composed, wearing a fitted black suit, hair sleek, face unreadable. Alex blinked, startled. "Rebecca, what are you doing here?" "Finishing what you started," she said. She placed a leather folder on the table, her manicured fingers steady. "Before we begin, I believe the board should review the revised ownership documents." The chairman, Mr. Lowell, frowned. "Revised?" Rebecca nodded toward the folder. "You'll see my name." When Lowell flipped through the pages, his eyes widened. This is impossible." Alex snatched the documents. His smirk faltered as he read. "What the hell is this?" Rebecca met his gaze evenly. "The truth. The Sinclair Group, my family's holding company, owns 71% of Morgan Engineering and all its subsidiaries. Every building, every machine, every patent you thought was yours, including your parents' pensions." Travis leaned forward, face paling. "That's not true. Aurelian Capital is a shell company," Rebecca interrupted. "My shell company. I was the single mom you mocked, the woman you left for a mistress you couldn't afford. You slept in a penthouse my estate paid for, drove cars registered under my subsidiaries, and bragged about power built on my silence." Madeline shifted uneasily, color draining from her face. Alex laughed bitterly, his arrogance cracking. "You're bluffing." Rebecca's tone was ice. "Then explain why your name no longer appears on any corporate accounts, or why your joint credit cards were declined this morning, or why your luxury vehicles were repossessed 2 hours ago." Gasps rippled through the room. The chairman cleared his throat. "Mrs. Morgan, or Miss Sinclair, these records are authentic?" Rebecca smiled faintly. "You may call me Ms. Sinclair. And yes, every signature, every transfer, every share. Authentic." Travis muttered a curse, turning to Alex. "You said you checked everything." "But I did," Alex stammered, his voice rising. "She's lying. She's—" Rebecca opened another envelope and slid it across the table. "Forgery charges," she said calmly, "for the documents you signed under my name. Federal crimes, evidence attached." The air turned heavy. Even the security guards at the door exchanged glances. "This is revenge," Alex spat. "No," Rebecca replied. "This is justice." She turned to the chairman. "Mr. Lowell, please proceed." Lowell cleared his throat. "Effective immediately, the board recognizes Ms. Rebecca Sinclair as majority owner and acting CEO of Morgan Engineering and its affiliates. Alexander Morgan and Travis Reed are hereby terminated pending investigation into financial misconduct and fraud. The gavel of fate hit the table. The room erupted in whispers. Rebecca didn't look at Alex as she gathered her papers, but as she passed him, he reached out, voice cracking. "Rebecca, wait! Please, we can fix this. We can—" She stopped, turning her head just enough for him to see her eyes. "You had everything," she said softly. "A wife who loved you, a family that believed in you, a future I built with my own hands. But you traded it for a reflection of yourself." His voice broke. "You can't just destroy me." She leaned closer, whispering, "I didn't destroy you, Alex. I just stopped holding you up." The aftermath unfolded like a slow-motion car crash. By sunset, the news had broken. Scandal at Morgan Engineering. CEO exposed in fraud case. Alex's accounts were frozen. His parents' company shares reverted to Sinclair control. Travis's firm collapsed overnight. Madeline, terrified of public backlash, sold interviews to tabloids blaming Alex. The next week, the court hearings began. Rebecca arrived with quiet authority, escorted by her legal team. Alex arrived alone, his once-tailored suits now ill-fitted, his expression hollow. He tried to charm the judge, to paint himself as a victim of corporate deceit. But every piece of evidence turned to ash in his hands. Emails, receipts, wire transfers, photographs. It was all there. Proof of infidelity, embezzlement, and fraud. The courtroom air felt thick with humiliation. Rebecca didn't gloat. She sat still, hands folded. When the judge finally ruled in her favor, granting her full control of the company, their shared assets, and legal damages, she simply nodded. Alex turned toward her, desperation shaking his voice. "Rebecca, please. My parents, they'll lose everything. Don't do this to them." Her expression softened, just for a heartbeat. "Your parents are safe. Their pensions were never at risk. I made sure of that." He swallowed hard. "Then why take everything else?" She met his eyes. "Because you mocked the wrong woman." Silence followed. A silence so absolute that even the reporters stopped typing. Weeks later, the world had moved on, but Alex hadn't. He lived in a small apartment outside Boston, surrounded by cardboard boxes and regret. The mistress had vanished. His so-called friends had blocked his calls, and his parents had stopped answering his messages out of shame. One evening, he passed by the company headquarters, now shining under a new logo. Sinclair Global Industries. He stood outside the glass doors, watching her reflection in the lobby as she shook hands with international investors. Rebecca turned briefly, as if sensing him. Their eyes met through the glass. For a second, neither moved. Then she turned away, her security team closing the doors. He stood there in the rain, realizing the cruel truth. The single mom he mocked had not only owned his parents' company, she owned the empire he'd spent his life pretending to build. And now, she owned the silence that would haunt him forever.